but we're going left. Another edition, Beef Up Front, coming your way. We are now closing in on the first ever college football 12-team playoff. We've had a playoff before. Matter of fact, this is Notre Dame's third time in the playoff. However, we haven't had a 12-team playoff. Nothing ever resembled what we are about to enter in, starting on Friday night at 8 p.m. Battle of Indiana with Notre Dame and the Indiana Hoosiers. The Battle of Indiana. Yes. Sean Brace, Ryan, Beef, Coyle, a lot to discuss. Let's not waste any time. Beef, how we doing today, sir?
2 days away, man. 2 days away until what we've been talking about since July, August, June, whenever we were doing those summer ball previews. Everything's been leading up to this, and really excited. I'm really looking forward to that Tennessee-Ohio State matchup Saturday night. But I think Indiana-Notre Dame can be a pretty good game, too. The other two on Saturday, I think, might be a little bit more one-sided. But it's going to be awesome. We're going to see some chaos. We're going to see one upset. I'm looking forward to find out who.
Yeah, got a lot of questions to fire your way, and we're going to dive into all four of these matchups and, of course, talk a little bit more in depth about some of the players that maybe for some people out there that haven't been paying attention and even hand in the air. Come on, man. Yeah, I can name you. Look, I got a top 50 list in front of me. There's some names in the top 20 that I'm like, oh, yeah, that's right. I remember him. He's a badass. So even for the most diehard college football fans out there, it's a good reminder, a good refresher. So we got a lot to cover here. Let's get right into it. And for the first question here, Beef, as far as Indiana and Notre Dame, once again, DraftKings Sportsbook still holding steady at this point in time. Let me just go ahead and make sure that I get the correct lines or the fresh updated lines. You are looking at a 7.5 point line. Indiana catches 7.5, 52.5 is our total. And the Hoosiers, damn good season. Nobody's denying that. 7 wins of 20 plus points or more. You know, when you look at college football as a whole, Beef, I would say, yeah, that's a good football team. Maybe you could even say a great football team. They had a great season. But now that we are down to the final 12, where do they stack up in your mind? Judging after the whole season in front of you, of course, had the extra game with Penn State and Oregon, knowing what we do, knowing what we think we know about these teams that are waiting, where does Indiana stack up in that top 12? Are they still one of the best teams standing?
I'd probably put them in at 11. I think I'd have them only no, give me them at 10. Give me Clemson at 11, SMU at 12. I think SMU is a team that benefited a little bit from playing a weaker schedule. You can say the same thing about Indiana, but when Indiana was clicking and when Indiana was on a roll, they were dominating anything in their path pretty much. Besides Ohio State this year, they took apart. Michigan was a bit of a tough game, but Indiana, I think the great thing about them and like the really fun thing about them, why people kind of rallied around that team, they just had that like killer instinct, like no mercy, no let up. Like we're shedding that label of, oh, it's just Indiana. We're going 3-9, 4-8. Like Cignetti said it when he went to the basketball game after his first press conference. He's like, we're going to be in that conversation with Ohio State. We're going to be in that conversation with Michigan. And he let him here in the first season. So they're the story of the year in college football, in my opinion. And they're here for a reason. You don't just roll out of bed and get 11 wins. You can say that about any sport. You have to still go out there and play. So I probably put them at 10. I think that they have a short run. It probably ends Saturday or Friday night in South Bend, but a historic season and a team to keep an eye out for going forward because people are going to want to go and play for that coach and that program, I think, now.
No doubt about that. All right. Staying with the Hoosiers, of course, that tough loss to Ohio State. Can that be exposed from Notre Dame's angle? What Ohio State was able to do effectively? Is there something that the Irish can take from that game and say, you know what, they had success doing that. The Buckeyes ran this well, whatever it may be, played a defensive front, some style. I don't know. But in your opinion, is there something that the Irish can take away from that loss, Ohio State beating Indiana a few weeks ago?
The thing with like Ohio State and the reason why like I'm so puzzled by them this year, like I was expecting their bread and butter, and even with all the great wideouts, for their bread and butter to be the running game and bringing in Chip Kelly, and then they brought in Judkins from Ole Miss. They brought in, or they had Henderson still in the backfield. they weren't really able to get the running game clicking this year. Like, sure, they were able to do it against the likes of Purdue or something like that, but Ohio State struggled to run the ball, and they didn't really run the ball that well on Indiana. When you look at Indiana, they have a really strong rush defense statistically, but you can also attribute that to they were up so many times in these big games, like blowing these teams out, that teams had to throw from behind. They didn't really have an option on them there. So, like, how good is the Indiana rush defense? Like, was Ohio State's rush offense just a little bit overrated, or did Indiana do a pretty good job of containing them? Because I think Notre Dame, the biggest question mark with them, if they're forced to play from behind, if they're forced to throw the ball, can they do that? They want to be able to get out ahead and lean on that run game. But if Indiana's able to stifle the run, that's going to be able to keep them in this one. And the adding the quarterback run game with Riley Leonard is certainly a big thing for Notre Dame there. So I'm interested to see that. Is Notre Dame able to run the football? Because I think that is what they did best throughout the season. And Ohio State, when you look at them, they were able to kind of lean on them as the game went on. But Indiana had self-inflicted wounds in that one. 2 special teams mistakes, and they went up 7-0. They had a 3rd and 33. Ohio State was able to get that to like 4th and 8 and then convert on the 4th and 8. Indiana had the chance to get the ball and go back up 14-0. So a few weird bounces go different ways. Who knows what happens in that one? But I'm looking at the running game in this one, and if Notre Dame's able to consistently run the ball in Indiana.
Hoosiers had a great season, no denying that. They are 9-3 ATS. They didn't cover in the first game against FIU. They won 31-7. They were 26-point favorites. They didn't cover against Michigan back on November the 9th. They were 14.5-point favorites. They won the game 20-15. Game was at home. And then, of course, Ohio State, they were 10.5-point dogs. The only time they were an underdog all season long, and they did not cover the number. They did not stay with the number. So, of course, losing 38-15 as a 10.5-point dog in that one to Ohio State. Again, the over in their season 9-3 to the over, and essentially in those games as well, those were the ones. Although the Ohio State game did go over, that's right. The only other one was Washington under 54, 31-17. So knocking on the door there. Interesting game. Can't wait. We're getting the party started with a great one at 8:00. Your outlook for this game, Beef, where do you stand on it? Give me a final score prediction.
I'm going to go Notre Dame 31, Indiana 17. I think it's a pretty tight game throughout. When you look at Indiana, they've been a really good, fast starting team this year. I know that they went 11-1, but you look at the first quarters. I went and looked at it yesterday. 10-1-1 if you took them on the first quarter money line this year. They're a team that was able to get up early on teams. They're plus 164 in the first quarter this week. And you look at the Ohio State game even too, the scripted plays, the scripted offense, that's where they did really well and went right down the field and scored. So I'm looking at potentially taking that Indiana there on the money line in the first quarter. But I think it's one of those games where the talent eventually is going to figure itself out, sort itself out. And Notre Dame is able to kind of just lean on them throughout the game. I think it's a close one, but I think Notre Dame's going to have like a late drive to really kind of push it over the top, give them the cover. But I do like the under in this one. I think it's 2 pretty strong defenses and a passing game with Notre Dame that I don't think is going to have many explosive plays. You look at the weather in this one too. This is probably the game that the weather is going to be the most impactful. It's going to be cold. It's going to be windy. I think we see more slugfest in this matchup.
Same temperature in Ohio State as well.
Really?
Don't worry. We're going to get into that one. 27 degrees. Yeah. 27 degrees. I believe they're all 3. Yeah, because the warmest one's 61 down in Texas.
Mm-hmm.
I want to say the other 3 were all the same temperature, 27 degrees. I could be mistaken on that. So you might be right. I apologize. One quick one as far as DraftKings is concerned. They're rolling out an interesting winter special here. And I bring it up because Indiana was just mentioned. Although you don't have them advancing past the first round, so I don't know how you feel about this wager. If you like Oregon to win it all, what's Oregon's number to win it all? But you can get Oregon, Boise State, Arizona State, and Indiana to win the national championship at plus 270.
Oregon's plus 360.
Oregon's plus 360.
Yeah, there's no who are the other ones? Boise State, Indiana,
Arizona State. It's all first-time winners.
Yeah, I'd rather just take the stab on Oregon there at plus 360 because none of those other teams are winning it. I will come up with a crazy wager for me to do if they lose that game or if one of those other teams win other than Oregon. But
Boise, watch out for Boise.
I don't think so. Boise was in a 7-point game with Wyoming just like 3 weeks ago. It's going to get figured out.
Yeah, those games aren't being played on the blue turf either,
No.
so it'd be a little bit different ballgame if it was that case. Just looking at some of these winter specials, so very interesting stuff that DraftKings continues to roll out there, of course, for the first ever 12-team football playoff in college football. All right, let's go ahead and move on here. And let's get up to the next game up. And of course, that's Happy Valley we're heading. And we talked about this one yesterday, Penn State and SMU. I did see a few people on my timeline beef that's saying that the biggest suspect team in their mind, overrated team in their mind, was Penn State. A lot of people trying to build up the hype for SMU and the offense of attack that they've shown all season long. And I understand. I'm just, as far as an away team this weekend, that's going to be impacted the most by the weather, by being on the road. No ifs, ands, buts about it. It's SMU. It's the Mustangs. So therefore, like, if I don't think they can win this game, which I don't, there's no way I'm backing them here. I just am a little alarmed that everybody, like I said, other than a few people I did see trying to make the case Penn State was very suspect. Not to say I'm the biggest Penn State fan, but I do believe that this is a team that can put up some points. And oh, by the way, play a much better defense than Clemson did in that ACC championship game. So give me Penn State minus 8.5 here, 54.5. Take me through your thought process as far as Penn State. What's the difference for them in this game against SMU?
Yeah, you just look at it historically. James Franklin wins these games, and not only wins them, he covers them. The games that he's supposed to win, he always finds a way to do it. He's 62, 43, and 3 against the spread. Since he took over as head coach of Penn State as a favorite, that's the 5th best in the country. Also 36, 26, and 2 as a home favorite against the spread. That's 15th best. But then you look at just straight up winning these games, 92 and 16 straight up as a favorite, and 58 and 6 straight up as a home favorite. Pretty freaking dominant in that regard. And I'm just in the boat that, like, SMU, your roster is still comprised a lot of like former American level players. This is a step up now. We're going to play with the big boys. The ACC wasn't really anything to write home about this year. You look at SMU, like, who it really is, any dominant wins on their schedule, any impressive wins. And you can look at Penn State and say the same regards. But this Penn State team, I think, is head and shoulders more talented. Penn State or SMU's offensive tackles haven't seen an edge rusher like Abdul Carter all year. I don't think they've seen a running back duo like Nick Singleton and Katron Allen. And Drew Aller, I think, is potentially playing the best ball of his career right now. He's pushing the ball down the field. He's taking some more risk. I think there's a lot of buzz and a lot of confidence with him right now. And I wouldn't rule out Penn State making a deep run. Once again, you got to get to over the mental hurdle of James Franklin winning a big game. And this certainly is a big game. But when you look at the big games that hurt him, it's when he's an underdog. And he's a favorite in this one, a pretty big favorite too. I like Penn State in this one to win this one comfortably. I think this could be potentially the biggest win of the weekend.
Ooh, interesting. All right. We are going to dive into some of the players that we need to know more about. And of course, we're talking about, and it's not even about superstars. It's a list that ESPN put together, but names that you should know and definitely you don't want to miss throughout the course of the 12-team playoff. Top 5, Tyler Warren's on that list, right?
Mm-hmm, for sure.
So how much of a difference do you see him making going up against SMU's defense? Do you think that they have anything, like if Penn State dedicates getting him the rock, which they have done in many games, like the amount of touches makes Brock Bowers look small for the Raiders. But, when Tyler Warren, do you think that that's going to be the game plan? Because they don't have a defense. And if they do, they're going to have to expend a few players to slow down Warren and maybe open up things downfield or, of course, underneath. Just as far as getting Tyler Warren involved, how do you see that one playing out?
Yeah, SMU had a pretty solid defense throughout the season, but over the last month, they struggled. And I think teams have started to find ways to kind of pick them apart. They gave up 34 in that ACC championship to Clemson. They gave up 28 to BC with their backup quarterback, 25 to Pitt. All those games have happened since November. So it's an SMU defense that I think certainly has regressed as the year has gone on. And if Travis Hunter wasn't in college football this year, Tyler Warren would have been talked about as the guy who's really the most versatile player in all of college football. He runs the ball, he throws the ball. We see sometimes he plays H-back, he plays receiver, he plays tight end. he's your best player, and Penn State has done a damn good job of finding ways to get the football into his hands. So shout out to Andy Koldenicki. He found a great way to really unleash Tyler Warren. He's been a really good player at Penn State the past few years, but this is a completely different animal this year. Over 1,000 receiving yards, 6 receiving touchdowns. He had 191 rushing yards I saw earlier, 4 rushing touchdowns. He is just an all around complete player. So they're going to find a way to get the ball in his hands no matter what, and he does the damage from there. He certainly is the difference maker in this one, and I think that Penn State's going to be able to pick this SMU defense apart.
Abdul Carter on the defensive side, is this a game that maybe he shines? And again, he's had a great season. Philadelphia's own LaSalle High School. Yep. Is this a game that, because I'm trying to think of big time matchups, big time performances in the NFL, and you think about those playoff games, and all of a sudden one of those like Micah Parsons has a day where he has 3 sacks. Is there a player on the defensive side of the ball for Penn State that could just light it up, and especially against an SMU team that wants to throw the football a ton?
Yeah, when you look at ESPN's draft rankings right now, they actually have Carter as their number 1 overall player. So he's a guy that's, in discussion to be the number 1 overall pick. The most fascinating thing about him, he played off-ball linebacker the past 2 years, kind of like Micah did at Penn State. And this is the first year they let him put his hand in the dirt and rush the passer, and he was the Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year. He has a chance to make himself a ton of money over these next 2 weeks, because when you look at the offensive tackles at SMU and Boise State, most likely, those are your 2 kind of teams in the way here. He's got a chance to really make himself some money and have a dominant performance. He could be a game wrecker in these matchups. He's not playing the Big Ten offensive tackles that are usually pretty stalwarts out there. He's got a chance to be a game wrecker in this one. Another reason why I like Penn State, because he's able to rush the passer into the regard of he can change the game on one play, on one strip sack, and flip the field if the offense is starting out slow. So when you look at a defensive player like that has the ability to change the game, that's something that obviously SMU is game planning around, trying to prevent. But he's a stud, and he has the chance to potentially be, the defensive player of the entire tournament with multiple sack performances throughout this playoff run.
All right, 10 double-digit sacks, 10 for Carter this season with Penn State. Are we sleeping on anything from SMU's perspective as far as big-time players on the defense or offense? Is there a name that can go out there on SMU's roster that, will come away and they kept it close because that guy went off?
Jennings is a really fun quarterback. That was a interesting scenario at the beginning of the year. Him and Preston Stone were kind of going back and forth. And a lot of the hype this offseason about SMU was because Preston Stone would fit the offense perfectly and was able to sling the ball around the yard. But Jennings showed that he was just a better fit, and he's a really good athlete. But Brashard Smith out of the backfield is a really good back as well. He's over 1,200 yards, first team all ACC on the ground. And Oregon, they showed the ability to go out and put some points up. But I think, and I talked about that going into that Big Ten game, having the ability to play that game in Lucas Oil inside, that benefited the offenses in that a ton. Now you're going into the 20-degree weather outside in the cold, in the wind. I think that's going to really harm the offense's ability to kind of throw the ball around the yard. So Smith might be counted on a little bit more in this matchup than usual weeks when SMU is looking to throw the ball 35 to 40 times. But the SMU offense has a few playmakers, but this environment, it just doesn't really fit, I think, what they're looking to do, really.
SMU getting on the board, they scoring a bunch of points. What's the final score here?
I like the under. I really like the under. We'll talk about the other ones, but I think I'm going to take the under in all 4 games. I think Penn State's defense is just a little bit too talented for this SMU offense to really spread the ball around and go put up a lot of points.
No chance of panic from Penn State. If things get a little crazy, SMU hits a big time play, they go up 7, they go up 14, something along those lines. You feeling like, here we go, big game, James, coming up short, coming up small?
I don't think so, because it's SMU. I really think the logo on the helmet plays a big factor. It's not Michigan, it's not Ohio State. They just got to be able to kind of step back, and it's 106,000 people in Happy Valley. It's a home game as well. You really have to take that into regard in these situations. Next round, we go to the neutrals. Maybe it's a little bit different, controlled environment and the weather in a lot of those. But the home field advantage is going to be huge in this one, and you could make the argument that Penn State has the best out of any team in the first round.
11-2 season by the Nittany Lions. Last time we saw them, they ended up losing 45-37, and it wasn't even that close, if we're honest. I think the late scores kind of made it a little bit closer, but Oregon was the better squad that night. We'll see what Penn State wants to do on Saturday against SMU. We got Ryan Beef Coyle, live beef coming your way right here on The Gambler. All right, next game up, 4 o'clock, 12-point spread, Texas. Game being played in Austin. 52s are total. Clemson plus 12, obviously on the road. Money line plus 350, minus 455 for Texas here. Any chance we get a little upset here, Beef? You know, Clemson get a little bit of some momentum with the win in that ACC championship game. Battle tested. This isn't new territory for Dabo. Quarterbacks played in big games before. Even this year, you look at what they did against, of course, they played bad in those games, but South Carolina, big game. Georgia, big game. So the fact that they've already been involved in these type of matchups with all the eyes, everybody, the build up, does that play into your handicap at all here? Or is it just strictly based off of who's on the roster, who's playing for both teams? And we're going to go ahead and make our play on that assumption, that play.
Yeah, I think when you look at Clemson, you can certainly use that in the regard like they've been playing kind of must-win football for the past few weeks, but like they got lucky to even be in that ACC title game because they lost to South Carolina, but they were lucky that the South Carolina loss wasn't a conference loss. So they kind of even just snuck in there. Miami was up 21-0 and they blew it against Syracuse, and Clemson finds their way in. And good for Clemson to make the most of their opportunity. But once again, this is a step up now in competition, a step up kind of to the big leagues with Texas in the SEC here. We saw Clemson in their one game, and I know that was the sun was still out. It was 95 degrees, and it was Labor Day weekend. But that was a eye-opening performance, and it was the first like real sit-down college football game of the season that you had the chance to soak in noon on Saturday. That's a game that's sticking in a lot of people's mind. And Clemson just looked like they didn't even belong on the same field as Georgia in that game. And I think the Texas defense rivals Georgia as probably even better than Georgia on the defensive end. You could look at it. They have the number 2 scoring defense in the country at 12.4 points per game, only allowed 20 or more in 3 games this season, and they ranked 3rd in total defense, only giving up 249.5 yards per game. Just an elite defense, and even if the offense is clicking, that defense is good enough to keep them in the game and go out there and force some turnovers as well. And I watched Clemson a bunch down the stretch as well. Like they were very close to losing at Pitt, who really fell apart down the stretch of the season. Kate Klubnik had a superhero type of play, superhero type of run, and found a way to pull that game out of their hat. But I don't think this Clemson team is good. They're my number 12 team out of if you made me rank the 12 teams in this playoff. I think Texas is going to win this one. I don't know if I'm going to take the 12, but I'm probably going to pick the under of 52 in this one too. I think this is way too many points, and I think Texas defense comes to play yet again.
All right, we know about Quinn Ewers. Who else on the Texas offense we need to be paying attention to?
Isaiah Bond's a guy that hasn't had a great year for them. He was the transfer from Alabama. He was the one that caught that 4th and a prayer from Jalen Milroe in the Iron Bowl against Auburn last season, but he hasn't really had that great of a year. I was expecting him to come in and light it up. It's been a really disappointing past couple weeks for this Texas team. They're going to need someone to step up and make some plays. And Clemson, as we know, belts out cornerbacks, really good cornerbacks each and every year. They got a few on this roster this year that are going to be potential NFL like 1st or 2nd round picks as well. So Isaiah Bond's a guy that I'm watching for. He's got the deep speed to make some plays over the top. Can Quinn Ewers or dare we say Arch Manning potentially make a few deep throws down the field and open this game up a little bit? Because that Texas offense has really been struggling, only averaging 21 points over their last 4.
Is it a big drop off from Quinn Ewers to Kate Klubnik?
At this rate, I don't think so. Like Klubnik's had a really good year, but he's beat up on a lot of the inferior opponents. And I know you said, big game in the ACC title game that they had. He's had a couple kind of must-win games on the stretch, but Quinn Ewers has played in some much bigger spots, much more poised. Like look at what Clemson did last year; they weren't anywhere near this. Klubnik's a fun player, an exciting player. He's a really good athlete, but I think even if Ewers isn't the guy fully on Saturday, I'd still rather would probably have Arch over Klubnik just because I think he's a more complete player.
Klubnik, 4 touchdowns against SMU. He was 24 of 41 for 262. And, of course, played really well in that one. South Carolina, quite the opposite. Had 0 touchdowns, 1 pick, but we got to give a lot of credit to South Carolina's defense in that one. 33 touchdowns, I believe, on the season and 5 interceptions. Pretty damn good season for Klubnik. We'll find out
He
if they
really
keep.
took care of the football better this year too. I think I saw he had 13 fumbles last season. I'm not sure what he did this year, but he really cleaned up his turnovers. But once again, this is a different beast with this Texas defense, and he really struggled. I think they only put up 14 points against South Carolina a few weeks ago, and I think this Texas defense is another step above that.
Yeah, from the Texas side of things, and specifically on the defensive side, they got a few names in this top 50 as far as names that we need to be watching out for. You want to go ahead and take us through as far as the Texas defense who will be jumping off the screen at us on Saturday afternoon?
Anthony Hill, he's really the guy that is the main force on that Texas defense. I think he's only a sophomore too.
Sophomore.
I believe he was the red shirt or the Big 12 freshman of the year last year. Just a dominant player. Rush the passer, he tackles well. His stats are here: 7.5 sacks, 47 solo tackles. But he's the guy that you'll see kind of everywhere on this team. The sideline to sideline linebacker. He's like what Devin White looked like back when he was healthy, kind of. Like he's that type of player. He's going to be most likely a first round linebacker in the NFL draft in next year, I think, is when he'll be eligible. But he's the guy that really makes that defense go. And they just have a group that's deep. They can rotate 4 and 5-star guys up front. They don't really have necessarily a stud kind of pass rusher on this team, but they have a good group of guys that play well together, and they're solid from front end to back end. There's no real holes on that defense.
They got 3 names in the top 10 here, and it opens up with offensive lineman Kelvin Banks. But then you go, as you said, to Anthony Hill. He's listed at 9th, and then Jedi Barron, excuse me, defensive back. And he talks about he won the Thorpe Award as the nation's best defensive back, 5th-year senior, 36 starts for Texas. So a guy that's been there, battle tested. Yeah, this to me is the one game that I have no issues backing Texas, as much as I would like to believe that the offense isn't clicking, which it's not. I think Quinn Ewers is still dealing with a little bit of an ankle injury, so he's not exactly the most mobile. That change of pace going to Arch is definitely interesting, and you saw it happen in the championship game, and I don't think that Sark will be afraid to go to it again in this spot, especially since it's home. So to me, yeah, if you're making me make a selection on this one, I'd lay the number as well. Give me a final score.
I think it's another kind of low scoring affair. I'm going to go 27-13 Texas. So in that scenario, I do have Texas covering, but my bet on this one's probably just going to be under a 52. I don't think Clemson's going to be able to move the ball that well on this Texas defense.
All right, let's get on over to 8 p.m. Tennessee and the Ohio State Buckeyes. Yeah, Vols, let's go. Bryce Harper, Omen. Come on, what do you think here? Right now, we're still holding steady at 7.5. 46 is our total in this one. Some people are wondering whether the weather is going to have an issue on Tennessee going up to Ohio State. As I said, it's going to be chilly. It's going to be a night game, 8 p.m. kickoff here. So I think there is something to be said about that. But the difference for me is I think the physical play of Tennessee, both running the football and defense, I think that travels. And that's going to be the difference. But if Nico is called upon, if Ohio State's able to get it going, and they have great receivers and they throw up a crooked number, and Nico is called upon, do you have confidence in him to step up and start, slinging it if need be to get them back into a game?
I do. I really think that over the year he showed like some progression. He got better. It was kind of that middle point of the season where he was struggling a little bit. But I don't really even think that it was so much that he was struggling, but more so that the team was just so damn good at running the football. 9th best rushing offense in the country. They just wanted to win the game. You can look at it like the Eagles regard. Like the defense is awesome, the running game's awesome. We're winning. Why go away from it? Like the quarterback, when called upon, is capable of going out there, using his legs to get a first down, or he can go and make a big throw on a third down. We've seen him throw some dimes this year. We've seen him make some big time throws. Even look at the Alabama game. He missed a couple deep shots, but he hit a couple, and that was the difference in winning this game. You're going to have to hit probably one or two deep shots over the top in this one to really kind of put your foot on their neck, I think. And I think he's more than capable of doing that. But when we go back to the beginning with the weather, like, I think the weather plays right into Tennessee's hands. You can say that they're from the South or whatever, but this team wants to run the football. They want to win on their defensive line. They want Ohio State to run the football at them because Ohio State hasn't really ran the ball that well this year. And I think if there's one thing that Ohio State could potentially exploit, it's their receivers for some of these Tennessee D-backs. But then you have Will Howard kind of throwing the football more. And how really reliable and trusty is he? So I think this game is tailor-made for Tennessee to pull off the upset. Everything's kind of playing right into their hands. They just have to be able to run the football on that Ohio State defense. 2 top 10 units there with the Ohio State rush defense, Tennessee rush offense. I think that's really what this one's going to come down to. And if like you said, if Tennessee needs Nico to step up and make a few big throws on third downs to move the chains, can he do that? And I think he's shown us more than not over the latter part of the season that he has the ability to do that.
Do you think Ohio State a little bit more was made out to, a little bit more hype
Yep.
than what they should have gotten? Of course, to change, and we know they spent all the money. And again, I'm going to ask you this point because last time we saw them, they played against Michigan and they got smashed.
Mm-hmm.
Michigan ran the football down their throats. Like, is that something that Tennessee needs to be looking at and taking away from that Michigan game? Going, you know what? There wasn't a lot of want from Ohio State. They played a little bit better in that second half, I understand, but not a lot of want. And Tennessee is, if they're physical, if that travels and that hits on Saturday night, they could run the football effectively against this Ohio State defense.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. I think it was Satanzi. It was like, is Ohio State really that great, or is it more of just a hypothetical? Like, it's a great roster of talent, but is it really a great team? Like, look at their big matchup against Oregon. They lose that one. They were a favorite at Oregon that night as well. Then the game against Michigan, they play right into what Michigan wants. Like, I haven't seen, sure, the Indiana game was good, but Indiana had 2 special teams blunders in that one. And we'll see on Friday night how good really Indiana was potentially. Like, do they get blown out by Notre Dame? And that might even discredit some more about what we think about Ohio State. But was this team ever really great? I think that they were getting too much hype, too much publicity, and not delivering. I was expecting that running game to be the best running game in all of college football, and they really struggled to be a consistent running team this year. Like, I agree with you that they are a little bit more hype than actual production. Like, and they never really fully put it together. And I think that goes back to the coach. Like, when you're that talented of a team and you're not able to get this team to perform to the fullest extent, that falls back on you. Maybe they make a run here at the title in the playoff, but I think all fingers go back to the coach and Ryan Day and not having this team fully prepared and fully ready to go. And I definitely think the upset is in the cards on Saturday night.
Team 6-6 ATS this season, and I think that tells you a little something. I'm sure that they were favored of big time numbers in a few games, but still pretty average, of course, spot on average, 6-6 throughout the course of the season for Ohio State ATS. All right. As far as Will Howard is concerned, and we know the story with what his deal is and how he ended up getting to Ohio State, but 27 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, pretty damn accurate, 72% completion percentage. And of course, as I said, the big one for me is the wide receivers for Ohio State. We just have to be honest with our thoughts on that one, and they can mess things up in a big, big way. They're very talented. So is there a chance that maybe Ohio State plays loose? If they do, they're at home and take a sigh of relief and they just say, Will Howard, lead us to the promised land and sling it. Do you think that's an effective way to go up against Tennessee 8:00 on Saturday night?
I don't think that Ohio State and Ryan Day trust them. Chip Kelly trust them. They played right into Michigan's strength, which was running or their run defense and being able to kind of stop the run and up the middle in the trenches. That's where Michigan was built well. And what did Ohio State do? They tried to go like right at them. And Will Johnson, the quarterback for Michigan, wasn't even in that game. A potential top 5, top 10 pick there. You got all these athletes, all these future first round picks on the outside. And they just went out there and said, we're going to just try and run the ball at you. And they just showed that they don't trust Will Howard. He's put the ball in harm's way, I think, too many times. He had a really bad pick in that Michigan game. He had the really bad pick, at the beginning of the Penn State game as well. When you do look at Will Howard, though, the thing that he does bring, kind of like Riley Leonard, he adds that kind of rushing ability, but not to what he used to be. He's a lot slower and a lot less mobile, I think, than he was back in his Kansas State days. So I think Tennessee would invite them to go out there and kind of throw the ball and be like, all right, our receivers, or excuse me, our corners have to be able to show up. Our defensive line is going to be able to get them. We just got to play solid coverage for a couple of seconds. Don't get beat over the top. Really try and keep everything in front of you. And our defensive line is going to get there because that Ohio State offensive line pass blocking is their main issue with all their injuries. I think Tennessee is going to be able to get home. And if Will Howard is forced to drop back and throw the ball 35, 40 times, that plays right into what Tennessee wants at the end of the day.
Final score, Beef. What do you got?
I got the Orange going in there and winning. I really think this is another defensive battle. I think we're going to see at least one upset, and I have it in this one. I'm going 24-17. Tennessee wins, so Tennessee plus 7.5, under 46.5. And the Ryan Day questions become even louder. And I think if that is the result, I don't think there's any way you can bring him back next season. But I think I got the Vols going on to win this one in the one upset of the first round.
Yeah, I think that question is answered if they lose.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think anyone's wondering out loud anymore. I think it's pretty much the next day that your out slip will be delivered to his office. And you know what? It might be the best thing for Ryan Day, and I mean that as weird and chaotic as that sounds. It's just it doesn't feel like it's a
Looks
place
scared
that
over there.
Yeah, he does. It looks like and just the way people feel about him, that fan base feels about him, and eggshells, and then some next season. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, and then so I just don't think he's been good enough either at the end of the day to put up the fight for him. So I'm gonna roll with Tennessee in this one as well. We're seeing eye to eye on this edition of Beef Up Front. Don't know if that's a good thing, but at the same time, look, man, it's college football. It's the first
Yeah.
time. These home fields are going to matter.
Mm-hmm.
Some of these teams aren't going to be able to travel well and play. Like I think SMU is going to be affected. And deep down in my soul, I think they're going to be affected. Now, will Penn State capitalize? We'll see. But if that Penn State team that played like they did against Oregon, albeit they lost, they're a better team than SMU. And as you said, I like what you said as far as the logos on the helmet. That's a huge difference. And as we went down the list, look, it ends for me. I think Tennessee goes up there and covers the number. I don't know if I'm going to get too crazy and say they went outright like you, but if you made me make a selection for my bracket, I would take Tennessee on that one. So good luck on all those plays, man. We're exciting. All right, we'll get you out of here on this one, Beef. Top 3 players for you. Give me your top 3 players out of the 12 teams that are remaining in college football. If you had to recommend 3 players for this list, they're probably listed here. Who are the 3 players on your mind that you would put out there that we should not miss when they get the opportunity to play this weekend or moving forward?
Yeah, so if we're doing the entire playoff, my favorite player to watch in college football this year, and it was awesome to see them make the run all the way to the title game and make the playoff. But that's Cam Scatterbo at Arizona State. Just an awesome player. Like even that Big 12 championship game, just 3 like crazy Marshawn Lynch beast mode type runs. He's just such a fun player to watch, and his story coming from an FCS school, it's been an awesome year to watch for them, and probably the team I've had the most fun watching this year. So Scottaboo, the running back there, I think he should have been in New York for the Heisman, but my favorite player in college football to watch this year, Jeremiah Smith, he's a beast. Like if Ohio State's going to win, they need Jeremiah Smith, I think, to make a couple big plays over the top. And we just talked about with Will Howard, do we trust him to go out there and throw the football? It's very questionable, but Jeremiah Smith has the ability to beat guys over the top, but also break multiple tackles on plays underneath. So Jeremiah Smith, the wide receiver at Ohio State, you're going to be hearing that name a lot more going forward. And then we'll stick with that game with the running back Dylan Sampson out of Tennessee. I think the most underrated player in the entire country this year. He had a year not that far off from Scattaboo, not that far off from Ashton Genty as well. Ashton Genty was certainly in a league of his own. But like I said at the beginning with Travis Hunter, if you take Ashton Genty out of the game this year, Dylan Sampson is probably right up there in the mix for the best running back in all of college football and probably in the Heisman discussion as well. Tennessee had the 9th best rushing offense in the country this year, and it was led by that running back, Dylan Sampson. So Dylan Sampson, Cam Scattaboo, and Jeremiah Smith, all 3 guys on the offensive side, look forward to watching them probably over these next couple weeks. And one of those guys is going home on Saturday night.
Yeah, we'll see how this one shakes out. Great list there. Scadaboo has been just tremendous. The only person he trailed this year, as far as scrimmage yards are concerned, was Genty, and we know how dominant he was. He had over 2,400 yards. He averaged 7.3 yards per carry and rushed about 344 times this season. Ashton Genty for Boise State has the week off, relaxing, getting those legs ready for whoever he'll be facing the next week. But and so will Scadaboo as well. But can't wait for these games and everything gets started Friday night at 8 p.m. I'm here to play football for the Irish.
Who we got winning it all?
I got Notre Dame in the final.
I have Tennessee beating Notre Dame. That's my final. You can get the matchup right now at 100-1 on DraftKings. I really like Notre Dame out of that bottom part of the bracket with the injuries to Georgia. And then, you get James Franklin there in a semifinal matchup. Notre Dame's probably favorite, I would say. The top, I think, is going to be really interesting. I think you could make an argument that the winner of this 8-9 game has a good shot to beat Oregon in Tennessee and Ohio State. Oregon, everyone's probably going to come on here and say Oregon and Georgia. So let's have a little fun with it. But that top could be fun. I could see any one of Texas, Oregon, Ohio State, or Tennessee going to the final from that top part. But I really like Notre Dame and their path there at the bottom. It's weird to say that with Georgia, but I think the injuries at the quarterback spot are going to be a little bit too much.
I do believe in Arizona State.
Then they only have to win 2 games to make it there. That is the big thing with the guy as well.
I think that Arizona State can beat Texas. I just feel like the juice is going to be there. Arizona State's going to pull a rabbit out of their hat. And look, Texas has to build up the hype, but I think having this extra game, it's going to be a difference maker for Texas, and it's going to hurt them. So Arizona State, I have advancing in that game. I'm having a hard time not picking Oregon, and if you gave me an Oregon Notre Dame final, oh man, that would be tremendous. I really do think that'd be a great college football game, and it probably do the best numbers. Maybe Ohio State Notre Dame might do better. I don't know. But yeah, as far as that's concerned, I would say Notre Dame in the final, or Penn State, of course. And I think the numbers would be there. But yeah, Notre Dame coming out of the bottom of the bracket, top of the bracket, man, I'm just having a hard time not picking Oregon at this point in time. So I'll go Oregon, Notre Dame in the final. Hate to do it, but I'm going to go chalk. I got Oregon winning it all.
Yeah, I mean, we can definitely see that happening.
Undefeated.
Undefeated, start to finish. They probably have been the best team in the country, but that's why we play the games. I think that is regardless of who wins this 8-9 game, I think that's going to be a tough matchup. Tennessee, I think, can definitely go beat them, talent for talent. And then when you look at Ohio State, they already had a really good game against them earlier this year, put up a good fight. Can Oregon beat them twice? It's going to be fun, and that's why we watch. That's why we get to talk about it.
Oregon to make the final plus 190, Notre Dame to make the final plus 400. You said Tennessee to make the final?
Yep.
Tennessee to make the final, yes, plus 2,000 beef.
Wow. Yeah, and it's 100-1 for Tennessee to play Notre Dame. I put a little sprinkle on that.
All right. Well, you need to get a little sprinkle on that 20-1 as well, just to make an appearance in the championship game.
I have the ticket from September too for them to win it all at 22-1, I believe it is.
Mine's not quite as much. I am holding 2 tickets at this point in time. I did have a Quinn Ewers Heisman Trophy loser. My only 2 plays that I had from future from college football was I made it in season. I have Texas and Tennessee to win a national championship. Small plays, but pays out a couple bucks, and have them invested at that point in time. But I think I might even throw a little sprinkle on that 20-1 to get to the final. I like where that is. Definitely Notre Dame 4-1. Need to get in on that one. But again, if you believe, probably should just be firing on Notre Dame week in, week out as well. Starting on Friday night against Indiana. Looking forward to it. Beef, always a pleasure, man. It's been a great ride. We're just getting started. 12-team playoff. Good luck in the GBC. Everybody, make sure you're following Ryan at Ryan Coyle 35. Subscribe to the pod. Beef up front. And as always, if you miss anything, at FoxPHLGambler.com.